disruptive.
Weird thing to happen. Take a look at this, folks. Coming out of the Western Standard. Ottawa censors details of the $22 billion in aid to Ukraine. So Mark Carney just announced we're giving $2 extra billion on top of all the other money that we've given off to Ukraine. Unaccountable, not holding legislation, not having a debate, not holding House of Commons question period about this. But we're just sending billions of dollars off to Ukraine without hesitation. And people are catching up to the idea that something's askew about this, that this supposed military aid, that we don't know exactly where this aid is going towards, is very suspicious. And now, from the Western Standard, they're reporting that Ottawa is not disclosing any information about where this money is going towards. Your tax dollars are going towards this. So, they say the Department of Finance is refusing to disclose full details of Canada's $22 billion in aid to Ukraine, blacking out budget line terms in a memo prepared for Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne. I know that's a legit person, but that literally sounds like a caricature of a Looney Tunes cartoon. He hangs out with Pepe Le Pew, right? François-Philippe Champagne. Mwah! Blacklock's reporter says the May 20th briefing note acknowledged that Canada was providing the highest per capita support to Ukraine in the G7 and predicted Kiev's recovery will take a decade and more than $500 billion. That was back in May. Now here we are in September. The damage is far greater, and it's going to take a lot more to recover Kiev and recover Ukraine. Because our institutions, our leaders from Canada, from NATO, from the European Union, from the UK, all over the place, continues on this devastation. And it says, but when it comes to the actual numbers, the department censored its own breakdown of spending, citing access to information exemptions tied to international affairs and trade secrets. The memo was released to Conservative MP Kelly McCauley, who chairs the Commons Governance Operations Committee. It came just as Prime Minister Mark Carney announced aid would rise from $20 billion to nearly $22 billion. Including military assistance. And like I said, no House of Commons, no question period, no accountability, no debate, no decorum, nothing. Just immediately, billions of dollars right to Ukraine, like that. But if we want to put money towards healthcare, if we want to put money towards education, if we want to build up our infrastructure, if we want to provide, adequate jobs, considering that high unemployment is a crisis right now in Canada, that is going to take, a large amount of legislation to do that. That's going to take many months of debate and decorum, and House of Commons needs to meet frequently to discuss these plans. But no, aid to Ukraine, like that. And they won't even disclose where the money's going towards. This is a crucial moment where allies must step up and lead, Carney says. I don't know. I don't know how Canada, how Mark Carney could say that when we know that Carney is being controlled by NATO. The reason that we're sending money off to Ukraine without hesitation is specifically because NATO has our asses. NATO is blackmailing us. NATO is a military mafia. And they're blackmailing, deceiving, and betraying Canadians in order to extort this mass amount of spending off to Ukraine. So for Carney to stand there and say that, our allies are stepping up and leading the charge into helping Ukraine. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not a leader. You're a follower. You're a follower of NATO commitments. Hence why I've been saying throughout this time, throughout Ukraine, throughout all the other NATO occupations, that at this point in time, NATO is useless to us. NATO does not protect us. Hence, why we should just immediately get out of it. We're never going to live up to their commitments. They always complain about how, the Canadian economy doesn't live up to the NATO commitment, their spending policy. So I say, drop it. Forget NATO. Forget being part of this alliance, because they have done nothing but harm to our sovereignty, to our defense, to our people, to everything that is remotely Canadian. And instead of spending the 3 or 4% of our GDP towards military spending to keep this operation afloat, that we should be putting that money towards our own soldiers, our own defense, putting towards our military first, so we can actually defend Canada. Right now, we have an open border crisis. Right now, we have drug trafficking, human smuggling going across the border from the United States to Canada. Our troops would be more beneficial to defend here in our homeland than they would be overseas. But that doesn't sit well with the globalist oligarch control that Canada has to bow to. So I don't know what Mark Carney's saying, that we have to step up and lead, because he's not leading anything. He's following. He's being a good little boy, a good little puppet for NATO and the establishment. According to the department, Ukraine is expected to need $162.9 billion. That's in U.S. currency. You can do the calculations yourself. Go ask Grok or ChatGPT. $162.9 billion. I wonder how many more services Canada needs to sacrifice in order to pay this bill. I wonder how many more ER rooms are going to have to close down so we could sacrifice more of our livelihoods to this never-ending war. And that's according to May, by the way. That was a few months ago. God only knows what the calculation is now, as they're putting pregnant women on the front lines in Ukraine. That's right, pregnant women. So they're expected to need $162.9 billion in foreign aid if the war drags into 2026. While post-war reconstruction is pegged at $524 billion. Who is this helping? Who is this helping? By any means, we are sacrificing Ukraine so that we can try to pet a war with Russia that clearly is backfiring. Clearly it's not working. Clearly we are killing off Ukraine and killing ourselves in the process. Who is this helping? Well, it's helping Zelensky, because he's getting the war funding. It's helping our NATO alliance that's getting profiteering off the death and devastation of continuing on this warfare. It's helping the military contractors that are creating more and more weapons for Ukraine and Russia to use to pander to both sides of the war, so we continuously kill each other. And it's also helping the corporations that, after all the bloodshed, all the dead bodies that continue to accumulate in Ukraine, they can go in and start stealing the resources. Why do you think Lindsey Graham starts talking about critical minerals in Ukraine? Why do you think Canadian companies are interested in Ukraine? Do they feel bad for the Ukrainians? No, they feel that, hey, we got to do something about those critical minerals. Because if we want, the world to go electric and everything going to be AI, we got to cause some harm and devastation and, get those resources. That's why we're, burning Nova Scotia. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Officials say the scale of rebuilding is beyond the capacity of governments and would rely heavily on private sector spending. You mean like BlackRock? You mean like Vanguard, State Street? That purposely want to destroy countries and turn them into their little companies? You mean that? You mean the whole purpose of why they overthrew Ukraine in 2014 and they never told you any of this? Is that, oh, private sector spending. Oh, we're going to have to reach out to the billionaire class. The billionaires that manufacture warfare aggression on the regular. They want people, they want civilians, they want the peasants to be angry at each other to the point of warfare constantly. Oh, we got to reach out to those people so we can rebuild Ukraine. Do you see what a joke, what a just goddamn disgusting, diabolical joke the war in Ukraine is? Canadians remain split on the issue. Federal polling last year found many believe Canadians' contributions have little impact, well, with interest in the conflict fading. A separate finance report in 2023 showed 32% support more aid, even if it deepened the deficit. 35% opposed, and 33% had no opinion. So, I can tell you the 32%, they are they're the generation that are still watching CBC News. Either that or they have finances within, weapon stocks. I can tell you those are those people. The 32% still supporting this, still thinking that billions of dollars is helping serve Ukraine. Oh, we're helping the people. It's our Canadian duty to help people. Ignore the pleas of Canadians and go help foreigners overseas in a money laundering scheme. That's what's Canadian about us. That's the people that support it. The people that still watch CBC. The people that are so brain dead to this war and can't obviously see how manufactured this is. And now it's become more clear in the fact that the Canadian government is refusing to bring details to this. Like, why would you not release to the general public, our public, where this money is going towards? You're spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money, printing out more money, causing more in our deficit. We're tripling and quadrupling our deficit as we're speaking. And you can't release any information. Why is that? Why can't you release any information on this? Well, here's a little hunch. Maybe it's because Ukraine is a corrupted nation. Maybe because we knew about this since 2014. Maybe because the mainstream media reported on this, and then immediately, as soon as Russia invaded, boom, no word about Ukraine. No word about the corruption, no word about the neo-Nazis that we trained alongside. City News reported that back in 2019, that the Canadian Army was even calling the minister saying, why are we training with a bunch of white supremacist neo-Nazis? Why are we training with these people? Why are we engaging with them? This doesn't seem like we should be doing this as a part of Canada. And the ministers completely turned a blind eye and let it keep going. And now you have a corrupted nation run by a comedian, Zelensky, who plays piano with his privates. I kid you not, that's how he started. He's a corrupted individual running a corrupted nation filled with neo-Nazis. And you're wondering why Canada can't release the information of where this money is going towards. Well, here's a little tidbit here where it says Ukraine's own anti-corruption bureau has released a report exposing Zelensky's $1.2 billion real estate empire. I thought this is wartime. We can't have elections. We can't have, peaceful sovereignty because we're in the middle of a war right now. We got to bring pregnant women into this. But Zelensky is buying real estate in the middle of a war. He's buying real estate. He's building up his investment portfolio in a war. And the network of shell companies attached to the illegitimate Ukrainian president. The Bureau claims to have official records of bank transfers, purchase contracts, and more. So here's a little video. This is from the Anti-Corruption Bureau, which we reported the Anti-Corruption Bureau is also corrupted. One of the members bought a fancy property in New Jersey thanks to our foreign investment in this war. Thanks to our aid, we're buying properties for Ukrainians that are not fighting the war and continue to pledge for the war, but they're buying up real estate on offshore markets around the world. They're buying up these huge mansions across the world. And now here's Zelensky in his investment portfolio to buy up real estate during a war.
A former investigator from Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau has defected to Europe with what she describes as thousands of pages of internal files, detailing systemic corruption at the highest levels of power in Kiev. The defector, identified as Alina K., has overseen a task force tracking offshore wealth transfers, tied to President Volodymyr Zelensky and his closest confidants, Serhiy Sheffer, Timur Mindich, Svitlana Pishanska, and other longtime allies operated a complex web of shell companies. These entities were used to acquire over 100 luxury properties abroad on behalf of the president and his family.
Система була побудована так, щоб приховати все. Гроші від державних контрактів переказувалися на рахунки дружніх компаній у Києві. Потім їх ділили на менші суми і переказували через.
So this woman's explaining that this tracking system was built to hide documents, to hide purchase contracts, to hide all the information about this money that's coming in, that's being funneled into smaller transfers into shell companies, then gets routed into Latvia, Cyprus, and Switzerland bank accounts. That doesn't sound like military. It doesn't sound like we're helping the war. It sounds like we're assisting the oligarchs. The same oligarchs that are preaching for more warfare. They're begging for more warfare. They're begging for more civilians to die in casualty for this warfare. Because they can get away with this crap. They can get away with the criminality of all this. And thanks to Zelensky, we're in warfare, so he can't get out of office. We can't have elections. We can't have opposition because we're in warfare. Hence why he wants to keep this war going, even though 69% of the Ukrainian population wants this war to end. The rest of the world wants this war to end. I want this war to end. You want this war to end. Trump said he wanted this war to end. But it turns out we have a higher power to serve. We have all these freaks, these monsters, these blood-sucking roaches in the NATO alliance, in the war powers, in the global tyranny sector that are getting away with the most heinous crimes imaginable. And they're distracting you by us getting involved in warfare. So we go and slaughter each other and slaughter our neighbors, our friends, our families, other countries to distract us from the criminality of the people preaching for war.
Латвію, Кіпр або Швейцарію. Після того, як гроші нарешті були отримані на іншому кінці, вони були відтрачені на покупку елит.
And it says, when the funds finally emerged on the other side, they were used to buy luxury properties. So, this is the scam. This is the money laundering scam. That's probably why Canada, probably the reason why they're refusing to admit to this is because it's embarrassing that Canada is funding a money laundering operation. Which shouldn't be that embarrassing, actually, because let's face it, the organized crime syndicates and the fentanyl crisis that's happening in this country, that is money laundering done by the Canadian government. And this is also part of it. That, NATO's going around demanding countries to cough up more bucks to aid this warfare. And then that money goes towards the government of Ukraine that goes into smaller shell companies gets transferred off their own country's bank accounts in Switzerland and Cyprus and elsewhere, and they go and buy luxury properties away from the warfare as they're continuing to purge their own citizens. There is no easy explanation to say how demonizing, how just awful these people are. In the words of Madeleine Albright, who once said that it was good that, 500,000 Iraqi children are dead, it was worth it. To use her words, there's a special place in hell for these type of people. And I hope they get their punishment. I hope that people rise up against this and catch these suckers for what they have done. And now the fact that Mark Carney is announcing that there's a possibility Canadian soldiers are getting pulled into this. We might deploy Canadian soldiers into Ukraine because they're running out of people in their own country to fight this war. That should be a call to stop this war. That should be a call to say to Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, sit your asses down, negotiate, and do not leave this room until there's a peace agreement. But they're never going to do this. They're never going to do this because of exactly this. It's a money laundering operation. These are mafia ghouls that do not care about anything. They don't care about anything in regards of even their own country. But they're willing to sacrifice each and every one of you if it gives them the benefit of a huge lump sum of money.
Нерухомості при цьому завжди під ім'ям ще однієї офшорної компанії. За документами Зеленський не володіє нічим. Насправді,
She says, on paper, Zelensky owns nothing. In reality, he owns everything. So, because this system that they've created doesn't track all the spending that they're using the financial aid from allied countries, since there's no way to track it, they can claim that Zelensky, doesn't own anything, doesn't own any properties. What are you talking about? But she's saying in reality, he's a multi-billionaire capitalizing off this war. And that's why he's going around country to country. That's why he went to the United States of America at the White House and cried on cue in front of Donald Trump, why are you not supporting me? Why are you not supporting the people of Ukraine? What are you talking about? And making a plea case for every single nation to comply to this. It's insidiously insane. And meanwhile, people have to make GoFundMe accounts to fund their operations necessary to live in America. Meanwhile, they're trying to crack down on people abusing Social Security and disability checks. Well, this is going on. Wow.
він володіє всім.
The total value of funds laundered through these offshore channels exceeds $1.2 billion. The files contain purchase contracts and bank transfers linking Zelensky's circle to assets across Europe. 26 properties in Spain, including seaside villas in Marbella and penthouses in Barcelona. 14 properties in UK, including a Chelsea riverside estate. 21 properties in France, mostly along the Cape Desert. The list also includes 8 properties in Italy and 34 apartments in UAE. For Ukraine's embattled president.
Wow, look at all those properties. I wonder how many extra bedrooms they have. I hear Australia wants to tax, people that have extra bedrooms so they can house more people. They're going to go after Zelensky? They're going to go after Zelensky? They're going to have to go after Ukrainian officials? They're buying all these properties. They have lots of bedrooms. Is that tax going on in them? Oh, of course not. Of course not. We would never hurt our precious Zelensky. He's a Jewish guy. He's fighting for his life. He's doing everything he can to support the sovereignty of Ukraine. I forget who said it. I know it's a comic that said it, but I forget who it was. But they made the joke that, you know, we're not watching a freak show. We are the freak show. You're not watching a circus. We are the circus. Because what we're living in right now is absolute absurd pseudo-reality. Like none of this should ever make sense to anybody. None of this should ever be happening. Like, if this was back in the, 40s during World War II and, we were sending money off to, off to England to help support their war efforts in fighting Germany, and we found out that England was abusing the money. You would think there'd be, investigations. You'd think that, Canada, United States, other allied nations would be, up in arms and holding accountability to this. Here we are in 2025 with the world at our fingertips, knowing all this information. None of that's happening. None of it's happening. Even though it's clear as day, Zelensky is abusing this money. How many more billions of dollars do they have to siphon out from allied nations to support the war? And meanwhile, Ukrainian military personnel that are actually on the front lines are noticing that the funding is not going towards their equipment. They're getting outdated equipment purposely, so that Zelensky could take the money and buy all these properties.
The accusations strike at the very core of his legitimacy. If verified, the leaks could trigger not just a political scandal, but also international investigations. Alina Kay, for her part, insists she has no regrets.
Я пішла не заради грошей або притулку. Я пішла, тому що правду.
So she says, I did not deflect for money or asylum. I defected because the truth has to come out.
Україна не може боротися за
Ukraine cannot fight for democracy while being
грабують
plundered by our
власні
own
лідери.
leaders.
Yeah,
that, maybe because the fact that in 2014, Victoria Nuland, Jake Sullivan, Antony Blinken, Joe Biden, Barack Obama and sorts collaborate together with the CIA, with NATO to overthrow the country of Ukraine and turn the democracy into a rogue state for this military operation to go fight Russia. Like, that was the whole purpose of all this. That was the whole purpose of all this. You can go look at, all the years of history, all the years, John Mearsheimer does, great work holding this accountable. Jeffrey Sachs, also a great person to look into to explaining all the history and historical evidence. You look at, I'm blanking on the name now, Oliver Stone's documentary on the history of Ukraine, the corruption, and so on. But what it really comes down to, I can make this simple. I can make this a simple statement on why this war is happening and why it continues on. The reason why this is happening is because Ukraine is being used by NATO, by the military-industrial complex as a proxy compliant state to fight a war against Russia, something that these people in the State Department, in NATO, and so on have wanted to do since the end of the Cold War. They hoped that they had the capacity, the capability, if everybody pulled in together in this, that it was going to break apart Russia. They were going to balkanize the region, which is breaking apart, drain out their economy, and the West would occupy control of this dominant superpower in the East. And this is something that they've been doing for years. They thought they can, seize territory into Russia. They thought that, the American superpower that it is could easily go into Russia, being post-Cold War, being after the Soviet Union collapse, that we can easily go in and transform it and kind of create this Western homogeny inside of Russia. But that's not the case. Because as we're, continuing on this warfare, as we're putting more and more sanctions onto Russia, the Russian economy is increasing gratefully. The Russian ruble is the top dominant currency still going to this date. And the fact that China, India, Brazil, who else is in the BRICS Accord? Saudi Arabia. So many of these nations coordinating together to form this economic alliance against the United States, against the Western imperialistic empire that is collapsing within itself. It's holding together with duct tape and band-aids, for God's sake. The fact that they're keeping this war going and they're trying to sacrifice everyone in sight is because they know that they failed. They knew that there was no possible way to defeat Russia, that there was no possible way that U.S. was going to intervene, topple Vladimir Putin, and turn Russia into a compliant state under the thumb of the United States empire. That was never going to be the case. So they're going to keep this going and keep fooling people while they're cashing in on the revenue being created by siphoning out allied nations. And they're hoping that more and more people, they're just brain sucked into this war propaganda and think that, oh, this is helping Russia in some way. They're not going to ask obvious questions like, hey, where's that money going towards? Because, right now, in Canada in particular, 2 million people a month are at food banks. ERs are closing down. There's a mass amount of the population that died from overdose or died waiting for medical treatment in Canada. Nonetheless, not in America, which we know America, their healthcare system is absolutely abhorrent, but in Canada. So we have every right. We have every right as a citizen to demand answers. If our taxpayer money is paying for it, we have every right to hold our country, Ukraine, and anyone else responsible accountable for where our money goes towards. And if they can't comply to that, if they can't release information because of the obvious corruption that we're seeing, then we have every right to refuse to give tax dollars to Ukraine. We have every right to stop supporting this war and start supporting our own people, start supporting Canadians that are in desperate need, start supporting people within our own backyard that we can easily do, that we can actually invest into our country and make things prosperable for this nation. But, of course, Canada, being completely complicit, being completely captured by the World Economic Forum, by NATO, they're going to go along with this. And they're not going to tell people why. And anyone that questions it, of course, you're going to get demonized as a Russian asset. You're a Putin puppet. You're spreading misinformation. You're spreading hate speech. Like they do with Israel. Just like they do with any war. There's a reason they call it war games. Because to the people that manufactured it and caused this warfare to break out, they think of it as a game. But for anybody that's watching, and anyone that's been in part of war or seen war or even seen, back in the day, movies like Platoon and Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket, that war is awful. War is disgusting. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Unless you're the ones profiting from it. There's a reason why Zelensky is not fighting the war himself. There's a reason why his wife's not fighting this war. There's a reason why people that, vote for foreign aid or support for endless warfare, their kids are not fighting this war. They're not fighting. But you, the peasant that don't have the ability and the finances to get out of this, you're the ones that have to fall into line. Because apparently it's your duty to serve other nations in support of your own. It just doesn't make any sense. But it makes sense if you want to be a corrupted billionaire posing as a leader and capitalizing for a real estate portfolio in the middle of warfare.